Hi guys, my name is UGWU KELVIN CHIMUANYA, the CEO of BSTER-TECHNOLOGY. Welcome to my CSS crash course for absolute beginners. So in this tutorial, I'm going to be taking you through on everything you need to know on CSS. I'm going to start from the basic to pro, and you don't need to have any prior knowledge of CSS for you to follow along in this CSS crash course. So by the end of this tutorial, you are going to learn how to write codes in CSS, and you are going to learn how CSS works, the basics of CSS, and the fundamentals of CSS. So by the end of this video, CSS is going to be your friend, and they are also going to be a friend to CSS. So now this class is going to be from known to unknown. So I'm going to start from the ones you know to the ones you don't know. Remember, this is a CSS crash course, so I'm not going to cover flexbox and animation, but I'm actually going to cover everything that you need to know in CSS. So thank you guys as you participate in this tutorial. See you in the class. So hi guys, before we begin, I want to let you know that this course is a continuation of my HTML crash course. So if you have not watched my HTML crash course, I suggest you go back to my YouTube channel and watch my HTML crash course so you'll be able to follow along with this particular tutorial on CSS crash course. Now everyone's CSS is different, so it's not like HTML that has a particular tag for a particular function, a particular element for a particular function. So in CSS you have different kind of ways to do one particular thing, and that is the reason why most developers find CSS very difficult, because it is pretty much right brain. So the next thing is that we are not going to be covering flexbox and animation. So flexbox is a CSS tree layout mode, so we are not going to be covering it in this particular tutorial because of time. So maybe later on we can go ahead and make tutorial on flexbox and animation. Now I want to let you know that we can't cover everything in this particular tutorial. We can't cover everything about CSS in this particular tutorial. So this section here will be dealing on the most important part that you need to begin your CSS journey with. So this is a CSS crash course, and I hope it's going to take you through on what you really need to begin in CSS and take you through on how to understand the basics of CSS. Another thing I want us to talk about is what is CSS. So CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. Just like HTML is not a programming language, it is known as style sheet or styling language. So CSS is used for website layouts and design. So you use CSS for website layouts and design. So it's not a programming language, so it doesn't contain logics. But in CSS there are some programming language that you can use to extend it. So something like SAS or less can be used alongside with CSS. Now let's talk about what we need to get this tutorial started. So for you to code in CSS, you need a web browser and a code editor. So you need a web browser and a code editor. So when you talk about web browser and code editor, web browser, you can use something like Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, Safari, Edge, but don't use IE browser, it doesn't work. Now a text editor, you can pick one from something like Sublime Text, Atom.io, Visual Studio Code, Bracket, Notepad for Windows, TextMate for Mac. So but in this tutorial I'm going to be using Sublime Text. So that is what I'm going to be using in this tutorial. So this tutorial, Sublime Text is suitable for it. Now the next thing is let's create folder for our project. So for us to create folder for this project, just go to our desktop and say new folder. Then we can name it CSS CSS crash course. So when we open this folder here, we are going to be working to different projects. So now if you click on new folder here, we can let's create folder for our first project. So I can call that one CSS Gurus, just as we did in our HTML crash course. Then the second one should be my website. Now this is where we are going to be doing our practice. So after practicing, then we come here and build websites for what we have actually practiced. So let's start with this our CSS Gurus. So I'll start by opening this folder. So now if I start by opening this folder, I'll head on to my desktop to open this folder in Sublime Text. So I'll definitely go to open my Sublime Text. So when I open my Sublime Text, I go to open folder, go to desktop, then select CSS crash course. So I'll select it. Let me just close this old one. Now when I select this, as you can see, we now have two folders here. So one folder here said CSS Groups and the second one said my website. So this is the one we are going to be working on first. So if I select this one, as it is open now, I can click on file, click on new file, and then click on file again, click on save as, and I can give this file a name of let me say, first of all, I want to save it in this folder. So I'll open this folder and I'll say, let me say something like index.html, then you click on save. So once you click on save, it's actually going to save it in this CSS Groups. Now this is our HTML file, you understand? So from here now, we can start by saying, in Sublime Text you can write something like HTML and click your tab, and it's going to generate this for you. So when it's generate this for you, then let's just put our title. So our title should be CSS Gurus. So I save this. Now the next thing we are going to talk about is methods of adding CSS. So the next thing we are going to talk about is method of adding CSS. So now we have three main methods of adding CSS. One is inline CSS, two is internal CSS, three is external CSS. Now listening brethren, I want to explain something that is very, very important. This is very important. So now inline CSS deals with adding that CSS directly to the HTML element. So this particular type of method of adding CSS is a very horrible way of practicing CSS. So no professional web developer will ever recommend this to you. It's very, very horrible and ugly. So I will never advise you to use this inline CSS. When we go into practice, I will show you how to implement all of them. Now the second one is internal CSS. This involves style tag within a single document. Now let me explain this to you. This is when you come to a HTML document, then create a style tag and use it to decorate the HTML file in that same file, but within the header area. So this one is okay and is good, but the problem with this one is that when you use this CSS within that page, you cannot implement the same CSS in another HTML page. Let's say you implemented this CSS now in home page, you will not be able to implement it in About Us page or Contact Us page or any other page. So now the best one and the one I will everly recommend for you is external CSS. So this involves linking an external .css file within the HTML document. So this one involves creating external file for CSS, then you link it to the HTML file. So in this, you can actually use this CSS file in different types of in different web pages of that same website. You can use it as much as you can. One CSS file in up to 10 or more than 10 HTML web pages. Let's come back to our code editor. Let me just save this. So if I save this, I'll open it in a browser. Awesome. This is our CSS Gurus. So now if you hover on this, you're going to see CSS Gurus as our title here, showing you that this is actually the web page we created. So now I'm going to divide my screen so I can see where I'm working from and my browser. So now if I minimize here, let me click on this one, minimize this too. So click on, drag it down. So come here now, I will reduce this to this, or let me just expand this more, then reduce this to this too. Now if I save this now, I can now see where I'm working from, and I can also see my browser. Now let's start by implementing the three methods of using CSS so we can learn how to actually use it. Now if you come here, let's say something like H1 tab. So these are actually going to give us our heading 1. So in this our heading 1, I can say something like hello world. So this is our hello world here. If I save it, Ctrl S and reload, the hello world is actually going to pop up in this area. So the hello world is actually going to pop up in this particular place. Now let me demonstrate. The first one we have here is inline. So let me demonstrate this inline. Inline is when you come to this HTML element now, which is heading 1, this HTML tag. You can say something like when you come here, you say style, color, you say something like so style, you say something like red. So if you put red, you save, you reload. So this is actually going to change to red. Now as you can see, we added this directly to the HTML tag. Is very ugly and confusing. I bet if you use this method to work on your CSS, you are going to hate the entire work. You understand? So now the second one, which is internal. So the second one, which is internal, is the one you have to come here and you come to this head area, you create something like style. So if you just in Sublime Text, if you just type something like style, you hit your tab, so it's going to generate a style tag for you, which is telling you that this type is CSS and it also has style close. So from here now, you can actually open here and say H1. When you say H1, you open your curly braces. You call this curly braces your selector, so your CSS selector. So if you open it, you say color should be red. Now if you save this and reload, it's also going to show you red. But let me just remove this first one that we did. Let me just remove it. This one is not necessary. So if I save it and reload, it's also going to show us red. Imagine if I remove this red that is here and save, if I reload, it's going to change to black. You understand? So the color now that we are working on is this one. The color that we are using now is this one that is here. no more because we have removed the one that is here. So now let's change to the color. You can say something like green. So let me just save and show you. As you can see, this thing has automatically changed to green. Now imagine a situation whereby you have something like H2 here. You have something like H2 here. Let me change this to H2. Sorry, H2. So if I save this thing, the second H2 is going to be black, dark color. So let me just zoom so you can see what I'm actually showing. So this one is going to be dark. The reason is because we have not actually added any CSS here. So imagine if I come here and say if I come here and say H2, open my curly braces, and I say H2 should be, so if I say something like H2 color should be yellow, and I save, this will automatically change to yellow. So as you can see, this is where we have our tags inside our body, but we are styling it from the header area. Now the last method of implementing CSS is external. So now let me show you how to implement this external method of using CSS. Now this time around, we have to go back to our folder, CSS crash course, CSS gurus. So from here we are going to create a new folder. So this folder, we are going to call it CSS folder. Then if you open it, from here we are going to create a file called style.css. So let's just go back to our code editor. So this is our CSS folder. So from here I'll say new file. I'll open this CSS folder. I'll give it something like style.css. So this does not invariably means that you must use style.css. You can use any other name. You can use any other name. You can use BSTER-TECHNOLOGY, but just make sure that when you want to link it, just make sure you put the exact spelling of the file. So you click on save. Now this has actually saved inside our style.css. So I guess if you go back, you're going to see our style.css file. So this is where we are going to be implementing our designs from. Now I want to show you something. Let's come back here. So this is our style.css, and what if I come back here and remove this style I put here. So if I remove this style I put here and save, so if I reload, all these things are going to change to black. Now what I want to show you is that I can actually implement the design from this CSS file, and it will reflect to this HTML file in our browser. So let's get that. So if I come back here now and say something like H1, then open my curly braces and say color, H1 color should be red. So if I save this and reload, it's not actually going to reflect. Why? Because we have not actually linked these two files together. Now if I go back to my HTML document and go to this head area, then I'll use a HTML tag called link. So if I, in Sublime Text, if I say link and hit my tab, it's actually going to generate this link and its attributes for me. So this link is actually has something like rel attribute. So this rel attribute is telling us that this is style sheet. Now, and it also has another attribute, type attribute. So this type attribute is telling us that this is a text or CSS document. Now the next attribute it has is href. So this href now is a link, which is where we are going to be putting the URL of our web of our CSS document. So now if I come here, I'll say CSS slash style.css. So if I save this thing now, what am I actually telling this link to do? I'm actually telling this link to, let me show you something right now. I'm in my HTML file, so I'm actually telling this link to go to CSS slash style.css. So this is our style.css. Now if I come back here now, if I save this, come back here and reload, you're actually going to see that this has changed to red, and that is because of the color we implemented here. So let me say if I want to implement color in this H2 now, I can say H2, open my curly braces and say color should be green. Color should be green. So if I save this now and reload, this color is actually going to change to green. So that is that on how to implement CSS and the three methods of implementing CSS. Now in the rest of our design, we are going to be basically making use of this external method. Now the next thing I want to show you, the next thing I want to teach you here is CSS selector. So this is basically the structure of CSS selector. So in CSS selector, we have something like this A is a selector. It's just like a link. So this A is a selector. You can see that this A is a selector. So inside this A, we have a declaration start, which is our curly braces, and declaration end, which is our curly braces. So inside this our curly braces, we have something like property and value. So remember we said color, our color should be red, our color should be yellow. So now we said H1 color equals to red, something like that. So this is the property. The property is the color you are putting there, or the property maybe padding or margin. So the value is actually what you want that property to be. So property background color, then value should be yellow. So what you're actually saying is that we want the background color to be yellow. Now we have something like property slash value separator. So this is our property slash value separator. So this separates property from value. Now we have declaration separator. So this one separates our value from declaration. So this is the basic structure of CSS selector. Now let me just, first of all, let me just get rid of this right now. So I'm gonna go back to my HTML file. I want to get rid of this H2 for now. So let me just save this. If I reload, you are going to have this doesn't supposed to show me red. So now apparently we only have hello world here. Now before you start, we are going to go into main design. So before you start designing, it's very important that you create your body. So look at your body here. So the rest of the web pages are inside the body. So let's design our body the way we want it first before we can now continue with the rest of the tutorial. Now if you come here, you say something like body. If you say body, you open your curly braces, say something like, let me just put background color for this body here. I say background color should be, I will use a hexadecimal, I will use a hex code. So this background color, I will put number sign, which is hash. I will say F4, F4, F4. So this F4 means a light gray. So if I reload this, let me say first, if I reload this, you're actually going to see that this background is going to turn from white to light gray. So awesome. As you can see, the color just changed a little bit. Do you understand? Now let's say something like text color. You understand? So let me just say put something like text color here. As you can see, this color is black by default, but I want to make it a dark gray. So if I come here, I'll say color. So this color now is the text color. So I will put my number sign here. I'll say 555555. So this This is the type of number that you can actually use in 3 places instead of these 6 places. So if I save now and reload this, as you can see, the color of this text changed from white, from pure black to a lighter gray. Do you understand? So I know you might not actually, when you practice your own, you're going to see all these things. Now if you come back here now, you can decide to use this in a 3 places. So 555, if I save it and reload, it's still going to be the same. Do you understand? It's still going to be the same. Now the next thing I want to talk about today is color in CSS. So color in CSS we have color names, HTML5 color names, hexadecimal, and RGB. So this is color name. Color name is when you say color red, color yellow, color white, or anything when you mention the color name. So but HTML5 color names included something like Cora and a lot of and colors that I cannot remember the name now, but I'll mention it later. Then another one is hexadecimal. Hexadecimal is this type of color that you have a number sign which is hash, and let me just say 6-digit numbers. Then the next one is RGB. So RGB is the one you have put the RGB some parentheses, like let me say 00255. Do you understand? So that is it. Now guys, let's go back to our code editor. So if we go back to our HTML file, the next thing we are going to do is to come over here and say paragraph. That is your p tag. So if you come to this paragraph, you can say something like lorem, then hit your tab. So in Sublime Text, you can actually write lorem, then hit your tab key, and it's actually going to generate all these dummy text for you. We did this in my HTML crash course. So to generate all these dummy text for you just for markup or for demonstration. Now if I save this now, come back here and reload, you're actually going to see that it has popped up here. Then the next thing you're going to do is, let's see if we can actually change the font of this write-up. So you can come back here and say, go to the next line, say font family. Say font family, you can say something like Arial. So when you say Arial, say comma. In a situation whereby Arial cannot load, then let health vertical load. So this is head vertical. Then in a situation whereby Arial and head vertical cannot load, then the page should load sans serif. Awesome. So this is sans serif. Then you save. So if we reload this, you're actually going to see that the font style of this might actually change. Awesome. Can you see that? So now there is a difference between web saved font and Google font. You understand? There's a difference between web saved font and Google font. Web saved fonts are the ones you can actually use just the same way we use this area, vertical and sans serif. Then Google fonts are fonts that you can actually import and use on the website. So let's just take a look at some fonts in CSS. Alright, so these are the types of web saved fonts. So as you can see, the example here and the font family here. So as you can see, this is the font family. You have Arial, vertical, sans serif. So we have another one, Arial block, gadgets, sans serif. We have bookman. We have bookman old style, and we have serif. Then we have other fonts like Comic Sans MS and Cursive Sans Serif. Now let me show you the difference between sans and serif. You understand? So as you can see, this thing now is a serif font or a serif font, and this is a sans serif. So if you can see now, a serif font has an extension that looks like an elongation on the font. So as you can see, this one has extension that elongated the alphabet. Do you understand? But in this sans serif, it is just straightforward. There is nothing like any elongation or extension. So that is the difference between sans fonts and sans serif font. You understand? That is the difference between serif font and sans serif font. Now the next thing, guys, is let's see how we can add font size to this. So for us to add font size, if you just come here, you come down here and you say font size. You say font dash size should be 16 pixels. So now if you save this and reload, if you reload, it's not actually going to change because 16 is the default size. So let's just reduce this to something like 11 and save. Then if we reload, we discover that the font size just reduced in size. And if you do it something like 20 pixels, then if we save, reload, you're actually going to discover that it's going to become bolder. But let's just leave it at default, which is 16 pixel. Then you reload. Then another thing I want to show you is font weight. Font weight changes the weight of a font. So if you say font dash weight, then you can say font dash weight, you can say something like bold. That is if you want the font to be bold. Then if you save and reload, it's actually going to be bold. Then you can also use something like numbers. You can say 400, you save, you reload, you're actually going to discover that the size just changed, but we are going to leave it to normal. So let's leave the font weight to normal font weight. So we reload here and it's actually gonna come back to normal. Now brethren, there is another shorter way of doing this whole thing. So let me just show you the shorter way of doing this whole thing. So if you can come here and say, let me say something like font. If you say something like fonts, so once you say font, the next thing you say font weight should be normal. Okay, then you shift, you say the font size should be 16 px, that is pixel. Then you start by putting the font family, and you can say something like Arial, comma. Then the next one should be Helvetica. Helvetica, comma. Then the next one should be sans serif. Awesome. So you save this, and so once you save this, I want to tell you guys that, so once you save this, I want to tell you guys that this is the same as what you have above. So let me just save this, and even if I get rid of this one here, let me just save and reload, it's still going to be the same. You understand? So this thing now, let me come back here. So this thing here is the same with this guy here. You understand? So let me just comment, and so I'll have my comment tag. So I'll have my comment tag. I'll say same as above. Same as above. So now I close my comment. So what I'm actually trying to say is that this guy here is the same with this guy here. Okay, so another style that you can find in the body is something like line height. So let's say line height should be something like 1.6 em. So if we save this and reload, you're going to discover that the space between these two lines increased. You understand? So line height is the space between one line and one line. You understand? So what if EM is just a unit used for line height. You understand? So what if I come here and say something like let me say 3 pixel. So if I save this and reload, you discover that the line height is going to come together and it will not be readable. So we are going to go with EM instead of pixel. So let me just go with 1.6 EM. So if I save this, I reload again, then we now have our write-up back. So now guys, let's see if we can add more to our HTML. So if I come back here, I can say something like this. Let's start by adding our block level element, which is our div. So if I say div, hit my tab, so I'm actually going to generate 2D. So let's just wrap this whole thing in a div. So let me just wrap this whole thing in a div. So the div should be somewhere here. Then I'll start by giving this a class. So let me just say class should be box -1. So let me just give this div a class of box -1, and let me see if I can actually push this. So alright, so I've pushed it one side. So now the next thing we are going to do is let's look into the meaning of class and ID. So let's look at ID as something that is unique that you might not want to use in any other places. Like if I say something like main nav bar, maybe if I have ID like nav bar or main nav bar, it means that particular ID will be for nav bar, and I will not want to use that ID in any other place in the website except for the nav. Now, but if I have something like class, I can decide to use the class, something like this class box -1. I can decide to use this class in another place on the website, or another page, or another section on the website. So, but if you know you cannot meet up with standard of ID, you can just go with classes. If you notice, technologies like Bootstrap, they don't make use of IDs, they only make use of classes. Do you understand? So now we have this class of box -1. So let's go and see how we can actually style this. So we have a div with a class of box -1. So let's go ahead and see how we can actually style this div. So now if you go back to our CSS, you come here. So guys, for you to target a class, you come here and say dot that class. So the class name is box -1. So you say dot box -1. So you open your curly braces, you open it this way. So the first thing we are going to do is, let's see, let me just reduce the size of this again. So what you are going to do is, let's see if we can add background color. So we say background color. So background color, we put our number sign, which is our hash. And if you put your number sign, let's use all this number, let's use something like a lighter dark or a dark gray. Do you understand? So you can say number sign, which is my hash, then 333 or 63, anyone. So if I save this and I reload, you're going to see our background color here. But there's something I want to show you. As you can see, there is a margin between this div and the top of this, the header of this browser. So now let's zero our margin. So you're supposed to do that in our body, so but we forgot. So let's just go back to our body and zero the margin. We are going to come to margin, so just pay attention. Say margin should be 0. Just put 0. Then when you save and you reload, you discover that the distance between this margin and this margin has closed. You understand? The margin that appeared, let's just do it this way. Let me just remove this margin first. So let me save. If I reload, you see a margin between this line and this line. So but now if I put it back and save, the margin is gonna go out, except on the header. The reason why the margin does go out on the header is because of this heading here. Heading has margin by default, but we are still going to get rid of that as time goes on. So let's come back here and see how we can actually add text color. So we can come back here to this box -1. We say something like color should be, let's say, hash FFF, or you can also use as 6 Fs. You understand? So let's save and reload. So you are going to see that this our right top has actually changed to white color, which is the color we just added here right now. Now another thing I want us to do here is if you come here now, you will discover that we have something like, you discover that this section is taking the whole width, so we want to push it at the center. So let me just zoom this back again. So we want to push this whole thing at the center. You understand? So for us to achieve that, so we'll go with what we call a container. So for you to put a container, let's just go back to our HTML and create another div. So you say div tab, then you give it a class of, you give it a class of container. So you give it a class of container, then you are going to actually wrap the whole thing under the container. So let's just come down here and put the div here. So let me just shift this one, so you can actually see the line of code. Awesome. So this is our container. Then let's go back to our CSS and style this container. So if you come to our CSS here, let me just come here and put our container. So I'll say dot container, I'll open my curly braces. Then if I come here, I'll say the container width should be 500 pixels. So if I say something like width should be 500 pixel. So if I save this now, you're actually, so if I save this now, let me just save. So if I save this now and reload, you're actually going to see that it has pushed this to one side. Then the next thing that I want us to do is, let's add a margin. So margin will be the space outside this whole section. So now if I come down here and say something like margin, okay, let me just put my margin to auto. So what I'm actually trying to say is all this whole thing should have equal margin around it. So if I save this now and reload, it's actually going to push the margin to center. Do you understand? So all of them are going to have margin automatically. Now the normal size of this width most times goes with 960 pixel. So I think that should be the full width. Awesome. But in this particular case now, is making this website not to be responsive. So if, as you can see, if I expand it to expand, then if I change to something like mobile version, it will start cutting off this whole edges, and we want it to be mobile responsive. So I will suggest for you, in the case of container, you should always make use of percentage. For the width, container width should always be percentage instead of pixels. So I'm going to remove this and put something like 80%. So if I put 80% now and save, if I reload this thing is actually going to be responsive. So now if I start moving this, as I expand, it responds to the shape and the size of my device. So if I change to desktop size, it's actually going to change to desktop size. If I change to tablet size, it's actually going to take tablet width. Then if I reduce to mobile version, it's actually going to change to mobile version. Now let's talk about margin padding and border. So now I know most people get confused about the difference between padding and margin, and also the difference between padding and margin and border. So in this particular session, I'm going to be teaching you what you should know about all these parameters. Now there's what we call box model. Box model explained margin, padding and border very well. So let's just take a look at this diagram. Let's look at what this box model diagram is talking about. Now let's take a look at this. Let's use this as the content that we just created, maybe the write-up or the image or anything that we just created. Now this content should have something like border. We all know what border is. Border is the outline around the content. So let's just say that this content here has a border. So the border, we have the border top, which is the one at the top. We have the bottom border, which is the one at the down. We have the left border and the right border. Now the space outside the border is what we call margin. You understand? So we have top margin, bottom margin, left margin and right margin. So most of you that write on notebook, you see where they say don't write on the margin. So the margin is the space outside the line in the notebook. So the same thing is just applied here. The margin is the space outside the border. You understand? Now when we talk about padding is the space between the border and the content. So any space between this border and the content is what we call padding. So we have padding top, padding bottom, padding left and padding right. Now these are the ways to put margin and padding in a shorthand way. So that is the shortcut of putting margin and padding. So we have something like maybe you have something like a paragraph in this way. Then we have something like something, if you say margin top equals to 5 pixels, you can say margin bottom equals to 5 pixels. You can say margin right equals to 10 pixels. Then margin left is equal to 10 pixels. So the same thing is also applied in padding. You understand? So another shorter way of doing it this way, of adding this whole syntax, is if you have something like margin top 5 pixels, margin bottom 5 pixels, margin right 10 pixels, margin left 10 pixels, then you now use a model I call TRBL, so which is top right bottom left. So you can now say this margin top should be 5 pixels, margin right should be 10 pixels, margin bottom should be 5 pixels again, then margin left should be 10 pixels. So that is why I say TRBL. I just use that shortcut to remember it, which is top goes with top and right, then bottom and left. You understand? So you can actually go furthermore and reduce it in this way. That is, if your top and bottom are in the same parameter, which is 5 pixels, and your right and left is in the same parameters, we have 5 margin top and 5 pixel margin top and 5 pixel margin bottom. You can come here and just say 5 pixels. So this 5 pixels represents this margin top and margin bottom. Then the next thing is margin right and margin left. Hope you understand what I'm saying. So if you say margin right and margin left, if two of them has the same values, you can just come here and put it direct instead of placing it in this way. Now guys, for us to add border to this our work, you just come back to this our box -1, because that is the one we are working on. So if you come back here, if you come down here, you can say border. you can say border dash right should be, let's add the size first, which is 5 pixel. Then the color should be red. Then the next thing is the type. You can say solid. That is the border type. So if we save this and reload, you're actually going to see a red border here, which is 5 pixels in size and solid in shape. You understand? So now if we want, you can start by adding border to the rest of the shape of the work. So you can start by saying, let me just duplicate this. So now I can come here and say border left 5 pixel, then border top, then the next thing is border bottom. So if I save this now and reload, you're actually going to see border in surrounding this our design. You understand? You can see border around the design. So we now have border top, border right, border left, and border bottom. You understand? So another shorter way of doing this is that you can come here and say, you can just say border. Awesome. You can just say border, then you say 5 pixel in size, red and solid. Awesome. So this is another shorter way of putting this. So if I save this now, if I get rid of this, save and reload, it's still going to end up the same way. You understand? So but let me just have it here so that you guys can actually see. Then I come here and put my comments. I'll say I'll put my comments and say same as above. So what I'm trying to say is that this parameter here is the same with the one at the top. So if I save and reload, it's still going to be the same. So guys, you can also target some designs of some border designs. So if you come here now, we can say something like, let's target the border width. So you can say border, we can say border width should be 3 pixels. So let's just put 3 pixels and save. So if we reload now, you are going to discover that the width just reduced in size. Then if you come back here now, you can say border bottom. So if you say border bottom, okay, let's say something like border bottom width. So border bottom width should be something like 10 pixel. So if I save, I reload, you're going to see that the border bottom width is 10 pixels. So it's now bigger than the whole edges. Now the next thing we can just target, let's say border style. Okay, let's use border top. So you say border dash top dash style should be dotted. So if you save this now, let me just zoom this so you can, let me just zoom this very well. So let's look at this line above. You understand? Let's look at this border top. So if I save this and reload, it's actually going to be dotted. Do you understand? So I believe we have dotted, we have dashed. Okay, let me just try dashed. We have dashed. Okay, so dashed is good, but in most cases I like going with solid. You understand? So let me just go with let me just leave it. Let me just go with solid. So I save, I reload. It's actually going to be solid. So have you seen how all of them behaves? Let me just zoom back to our normal work size. So this should be my normal work size. Now I want to leave this thing very cool and simple. So let me just copy this, come down here and put it. Then let me just get rid of this so that it can just overwrite everything. So now if we reload, it's gonna come back to its normal size. Now let's start by adding padding. So if I just say padding dash top, so padding, my top padding should be 20 pixel. So if I save this and come here and reload, you notice there will be a space between this border and the content, no more outside, because we are talking about padding this time. So if I reload this, as you can see, the padding top just gave us a space. Now if you notice, there is a padding before this. Before we added this padding, there was a padding here by default, and that is because H1 has padding by default. So let me show you, if you don't need that, let me show you how you can actually remove that default padding. So if you come back here, and if you come back here, you can say put your asterisk. So what this actually means is everything. So you say, you open your curly braces, then you say something like margin should be 0, then padding should be 0.2, then you save and you reload. So as you can see, what you just said is all the padding and margin by default should go away. So what this aesthetic means is just everything about padding and margin that has to do with default should go away. But as for me, I'm actually going to, let me just comment this so that it won't take effort, but for you can just put it for yourself. So as for you can just put it for yourself, but for me, let me just comment it. I don't actually need. So if I save and reload, it's actually going to come back to its default shape. So let's continue adding our padding. So I can just come here, copy this. We are going to add it with the long process. So paste, come, paste, come, paste. Then the next thing I say, padding bottom 20 pixel, padding right 20 pixel, then padding bottom. Okay, we have added padding bottom, padding left. So if I save this and reload, it's just going to give me the whole thing. But this is a long process. If you want to add it in the shorter process, you can just come here and say padding. You can say padding should be equals to 20 pixel. So now if you say padding equals to 20 pixel, I want to put it to that even if I get rid of this and reload, it's still going to be the same. It's not going to change. So all of them are just the same. So if I paste this and say, I'll come here and say so I'll say same as above, so that you guys can just have it like this. Now the next thing that we want to talk about is margin. So let me show you how you can add margin. So if you come here, you just say, let's start with margin top. So if you say margin, top, for example, we say 20 pixel. So if I save this and reload, it's gonna add a space here, just in a way of pushing this whole thing down, and that is because it wants to add a space above this whole stuff. So if I reload it, as you can see, it's just pushed this design down, and that is because we just added margin between we just added margin outside this top border. So imagine in a situation whereby you want to add margin in the whole part of this design. So you can just come here and say only margin should be something like 20 pixel. So if you save and reload, it's actually going to add margin here, 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 and here. So what if you want to only add margin to the top and bottom, and maybe you don't want to add margin to left and right? So you can just come back here and say top and bottom. Remember how I taught you should be top and bottom should be 20 pixels, then left and right should be 0. So if I save this and reload, as you can see, top and bottom has border, but the border we had here previously has gone out because I had to zero it here. Do you understand? So let's save. Now guys, let's talk about text formatting style. So when we talk about text formatting style, is how we can actually style the text inside this our particular design. So if I come here, I want to target something like let me say dot box dash 1, then I shift, I say h1. So I want to target any h1 inside box dash 1. So and this is the h1 inside box dash 1. So I want to target this and actually style it. Now if I come here, I open my curly braces for me to start writing my style. Then I can say font family should be something like Tohoma. Say Tohoma. So most times if you want to write font, you put it in a capital letter. So I can say Tohoma. Then if I reload, you're going to notice that the font style just changed, the font family just changed. Then the next thing I want to add is font weight. So I say font dash weight should be something like, let me just say 800. So if I save and reload, this is the size by default. So let's see if we have something like 100 here. Awesome. You can see that the font width just reduced. So but the size by default should be 800. So let's just leave it by 800. So if I reload, it will come back to its original shape. Then another thing is, what if I want to make this font here to be italic? So if I come back here, I say font dash style should be italic. So if I save this and reload, it's actually going to change this font to italic shape. As you can see, it has bent it, slanted to italic. Then what if I want to add something like underline here? I can say text dash decoration should be underline. Text decoration should be underline. So if I reload this, it's actually going to add underline for me. What if I want to change it to uppercase? I want to change it to capital letter. I can say text dash transform should be uppercase. So text transform should be uppercase. So if I reload this, as you can see, it has changed to uppercase. Then what if I want to add space between each letter? Maybe so all these the letters here are very close and I want to add space. Then I can say letter space letter spacing should be, let me say 0.2 em, 0.2 em. I save. Can you see that? Then what if I want to add space between these two words? Then I can come back here and say word spacing, word dash space. So word space should be 1 em. So if I save this and reload, as you can see, it just added a space between these two words. So these are the basics of text formatting style. Now the next thing we are going to do is, let's see if we can add another box to our HTML. So I go back to my HTML. Let me just zoom back small. So I copy box 1. So this is my box 1. I copy this, then come down here and paste it. So if I paste it, I change this box 1 to box 2. So the second box should be box 2. We are done with box 1. So if I come here and reload, you're actually going to see the box 2 here. And basically now we don't have any style on this box 2. So we are going to start another style here. Now for us to start styling this, we have to go back to our CSS file, then target our box dash 2. So if I just come here, dot box dash 2, then I open my curly braces. So now for us to start styling this, you can just come here and say something like border. So let's just add border 3 pixel size. If you come here, you say 3 pixel by size, then the style should be dotted, then the color should be light gray. So I just put my number sign 3C, or you can say 6C. So if I save now, reload, you're going to see our dotted border here. Can you see that? You're going to see our dotted border here. So let me just zoom back. Now the next thing I want us to add is padding. So you say padding equals to 20 pixel. So you save, you reload. It's actually going to add space inside here. Awesome. So as you can see, it has added space around here inside the border. Then you can just say our margin should be, let's add margin top and bottom, then left and right should be 0. So I can just say margin should be 20 pixel top and bottom, then right and left should be 0. So if I reload this, so if I save this and reload, you notice it just added a simple space at the top and bottom. So let me just zoom back again. Now the next thing is, let's see if we can actually add our LIs. So let me just go back to our HTML file, then come here and put a div. So I'll come here and say div. Awesome. So if I open this div, I'll give this div a class of category. So say class should be, so class should be categories. Then inside this div, I'll put something like h2. So this h2 will have a name of something like category. So this h2 will have a name of category. Then we come back here, we start with our unordered list, which is ul. So in my div, I start by my li. So li, which is my list. So this li should have something like a link, which is a, so this stuff, so this link, this anchor tag, we call it anchor tag. So this anchor tag should go nowhere, so I'll put hash here. I'll hash so it won't be able to go anywhere. So here I'll have something like category. So I'll have something like category. I'll save. So I will copy, I'll save. So from here I'll have something like let me just have something like category 1, category 2, category 3, and category 4. So if I save all these things here, let me just close this space. So if I save all these things here, then come back and reload, this is how it is going to look like without any CSS. This is how these LIs are going to look like. So now there's something I want to do here. The thing I want to do here is that I want to add margin to this so that we can be able to scroll up and down. So in your own case, you might not want to do this, but I'm just doing it so you'll be able to see what I'm doing. So if I come down to this body, I'll add my block level element, which is div. So this div, now I'll come here, I'll say style, I'll say margin, equals to, let me just say something like 500 pixels. So if I save this and reload, I can be able to, so what I just did is to add space here, to create a space here, so I can be able to scroll up and down. So this is our categories, and this is how it looks with no CSS. Now let's see how we can start styling this. Then let me just copy this our class here. So I go back to my CSS. So if I come here, I say dot categories, I open my curly braces, then I come down here, I start with my border. So I say border should be 1 pixel by size. Then color should be light gray, that is hash 3C. Then the next one should be the style, which is solid. So if I save this and reload, you're actually going to see a solid border surrounding this. Then the next thing, let me see if I can add padding around this whole stuff. So I can say padding, padding equals to 10 pixels. So if I save this and reload, it's actually going to add a padding around this whole stuff. Then the next thing is, let me see if I can add something like border radius. So I say border dash radius. Border dash radius should be 15 pixels. So if I add 15 pixel border radius and reload, you're actually going to notice that there will be a curve around these border edges. That is the radius. So if I reload, can you see that? This is just what border radius can do. So the next thing is, let's see if we can target our categories H2. You understand? So if I say dot categories H2, then I open my curly braces, then what this actually means is that I want to style the H2 in our category. So remember, this is our H1, you understand, in our paragraph. So this is also in our box. So this is our H2 in our box. So but we have this particular H2 in our categories. Do you understand? So now what I'm going to do is I want to push this text to center. So now I'll just say text dash align should be center. So if I save this and reload, it's actually going to push this into the center of the box. So now the next thing we are going to do, guys, is let's style our UL. So now if you come back here, I say dot categories, then shift, I say UL. Awesome. Then I open my curly braces, I come down here, I say something like padding. So now if you notice, this UL has padding. By default it has padding here, so we want to get rid of this padding. Then you say, come back here, you say padding should be 0. Padding should be 0. You save. So now if you save and reload, the padding is actually going to go off. Now if you check here, we have something like a boiling point here. You can change it to square. You understand? You can change it to square, this boiling point here. Let me just zoom this so you can see what I'm talking about. So this ball point here, if we come here now and say list style should be something like square. Okay, list style should be something like square. If I save and reload, also here you can see that it has changed to square. Now we can also get rid of this, because in most cases we don't need it. We might actually end up adding another thing altogether. So if I come back here and say square, okay, I'll come back here and say list style again should be none. So if I put it in none and reload, it's actually going to disappear. You understand? So that is how. Let me just zoom back so you can have our design to be sleek. I think this side is okay for me. Now the next thing we are going to talk about is link. Now when we talk about link, we're actually talking about the anchor tag we used on this. So we are actually talking about the whole link on the website. So there are some settings that you need to give link before you get started, because we need to get rid of this underline and this color and some whole lot of stuff, something like hover color and the rest. So I'll just come back here and I'll come here and say A. So I'll just say A, which is our link. I'll open my curly braces. So what you are going to do is, let's get rid of this underline here first. Then I say text then I'll say text dash decoration should be none. Now if I save this and reload, this underline is going to disappear. Now the next thing is, let's talk about the color. The blue color is so boring, so I want to change it to black, which is our normal color. So if I come back here, I'll say text color, that is link color, sorry, should be, let me just say hash 000, which is, you can also use 60 in this case. So if I reload this and if I save and reload, as you can see, our link has actually turned to dark. So what about when we talk about link hover? So if I say something like A, then put my colon, I say hover, that is A hover, then I put my curly braces, then open it here, and I say color, hover color should be red. So if I save this now, I want to tell you guys that if I reload this and hover on this like this, it's going to turn to red. So if I reload, can you see that if I hover, it's going to actually turn to red. So what about when we talk about active states? So now if I say A, open my colon, then I say active state should be something like active state should be something like active color. Let's just add active color. So I say active color should be something like color green. Let me just give it green. So active color should be green. So if I save this and reload, if I as you can see, if I click on it, it's actually going to turn to green. You understand? So which means it's active. So if I right click on it, it's going to turn to green, which means it's active. If I right click on this one, it's also going to turn to green, which is invariably telling us that this is active. So guys, what about when we talk about visited? So if I put my A tag here, I put my column, I say visited, I put my curly braces, I open my curly braces, then I can say visited color should be yellow. I say color should be yellow. So if I save this and reload, all of them are going to actually turn to yellow, and that is because we just visited all of them. We visited all of them just now. Now what you are going to do now is, let's just go back to our HTML file. Then let me say put another li that we have not visited before. So if I put another li, which is category 5, and save, if I reload this, okay, it didn't actually change. Okay, that is because all of them has the same page, which is hash, which is going nowhere. So let's just say something like about.html, which means we want to redirect this link to about.html. So if I save this now, if I save this and reload, as you can see, this one has actually changed to dark, and the reason why it's changed to dark is that because we have not visited this page. So if I visit this page, it might end up changing to yellow. So if I click and go back and reload, it didn't change to yellow. Actually, the thing is that maybe it's because we don't have that page. This about.html does not actually exist. You understand? But I don't know the last time I used visited, but just know it's something that you can actually do. Now let's go back to our style sheet again, our styling file. So now let me just save this, and this our visited is still yellow. So let me just change it to, our visited to black. So I want to change it to black, so I come back here and put it black. So if I save and reload, is actually going to change this color to black. So now let's go back and see how we can style our categories li, because we have styled our ul already. So if I come back here, I say dot categories li, which is our list. Then I open my curly braces. Then I'll start by adding, I want to add a padding to our li. So I say padding dash, I'll say padding dash bottom should be 6 pixels. So I say 6 px. So if I save and reload, you're actually going to notice that this stuff the space just increased between these two lines. Then I'll start by adding again. I'll add border. So I'll say border bottom so I'll say border bottom should be, so I'll say border style should be something like dotted. Then the size should be 1 pixel. then the color should be hash 333. You can also use 63. So if I reload this, you're actually going to see that it has added a dotted border under each li. Do you understand? So the next thing I want us to look into is a list style image. So this list style image says list dash style image. So if you come back here, list dash style image, then what you are going to do is you say URL. So if you open this URL like this, you put this your quotation mark. So if you put this quotation mark, then you say let's just use something like dot slash. I will tell you the meaning of this, and I'm doing slash image. Okay, slash images slash, let's say, check dot png. You understand? So if you save this, what you are actually, we want to add a check mark here. So we can go to our Google and say something like, I say something like check mark. I hit enter, then I go to images, and I'm actually going to save this. So let me just save this as. So I will give it a name of check. So this should be check.png. So where will I save it? I will save it inside. I'll go to my desktop, go to CSS Crash Course, go to CSS Grooves. Then from here, I'll create a new folder. I'll call that folder images, which is this images here. So I'll call that folder images. So if I open this, then I will now save the check.png here. Do you understand? So now let me just cancel this. If I come here and reload this, you're actually going to see that we have a very big check mark here. Do you understand? We have a very big check mark here. Now let me explain what this URL is talking about, so you won't get confused. As you can see, we have // images / check. So now I think I've taught this in my HTML crash course. So if we come back here, as you can see, the folder we are working on is CSS Gurus. So now inside this CSS Gurus, now we want to pick the image we downloaded, which is this check mark. This is the check mark we downloaded, and remember, we are picking it from, we want to pick the file we downloaded, which is inside these images. And remember, we are not picking it from HTML file, we are picking it from CSS file, which is inside the folder. So now if you open this, what we are actually saying is this dot means that the link should come out from this folder, which is CSS. So the dot means come out from this CSS folder, then go into a folder called images. So when it comes out, it will pick a folder which is / images. You understand? Which is this /. So the dot is saying come out from the CSS folder, which is this CSS file we are working on. Then go to / images and pick check.png. You understand? So if you go back here now, when it comes out from CSS, to open this file, which is images and check.png. I just hope you understand what I'm trying to say. Then as you can see, this thing here is too big. So let's see how we can actually reduce the size. So if I come back here, I'll use my Photoshop this time around. I'll drag this to my Photoshop, open it. So if I open it to my Photoshop, I go to images, I go to image size, then I'll change the resolution to 10 pixels. So let me just change it to 10 pixels. So, or let me just use something like 7 pixels. So if I change it to 7 pixels like this, then I will save. So if I save this now, so now what you are going to do is after reducing the size, we go to file, we go to save as. So we're actually going to save it as png, check.png. So we save it, should tell us that the file already exists. We say yes, replace, click OK. So now when we go back here and reload this, it's actually going to, the size is actually going to be small. It's actually going to be small. So let's reload this. Sorry. So can you see that the size is also small? So we still need to reduce the size because the size I'm seeing here is too big. So let's go back to Photoshop, images, image size. I'm reducing the resolution to something like, let me just use something like 2. I save. So I save it in PNG again, Control S. So if I come back here and reload, it has actually reduced and it is more tinier now. You understand? So I think these two might be too small for me. So let me just change, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. So let me just change image size. Let me just use something like 5, or let me say something like 4 pixels. So if I save this now, I save by pressing my Control S. So if I come back here, if I reload this, sorry, image size should be, let me just say 5 pixels. So if I save this, then if I come back here and so let me use something like 3. So if I save this now, I save it again, Control S. So I come back here, I reload. So it's actually going to give me the perfect shape I want it to be. You understand? So I want it to be in this shape. So the next thing I want to do, guys, is, as you can see, this check mark icon is outside, so I want to push it inside. And as you can see, in our UL, we made our padding to be 0. So here I can just come back here and say padding left. Padding left should be something like padding left should be something like 20 pixel. So if I save this and reload, it's actually going to push this inside. Now I think we are running out of time, but we are still trying to hit the whole edges of CSS basics. Now the next thing we are going to look at is to put in our form. So form is pretty much ugly by default. So by default form is very ugly. So without CSS, form is very ugly. So now we are going to put our form and see how we can style our form. So the form should stay around the container. So if you take a look at this, you see that our container is around here. So this div is actually our container. So let me just put a comment tag here and say container. So this is my comment. I say, so this is my container. This is where my container ended. So I can actually come here and now put, let me just close this div to be here. Then let me come here and put my form. So I cannot actually start afresh and be building this form because of time. We're already running out of time. So we're already running out of time, and we need to rush this. So as you can see, this class is almost taking 2 hours and we need to rush a whole lot of things. So now the next thing we are going to do, guys, is this is just a form. So this is a form I created and I added a class of form group for each. So if you have watched my HTML crash course, you should know how to create form by now, what the meaning of form label and form input. So now if you save this now and reload, you're going to see our form here. So as you can see, this is very ugly, but when we are done styling the form, everything is going to look pretty. Now for us to start designing our form, for us to start styling our form, we have to give this form a class. So let me just give this form a class of my dash form. So this should be the class of the form. Now heading over to our style sheet. Now what we are going to do here is I will target my form. That is my form. I'll say dot my form. I open my curly braces. I say I'll add some padding. So I'll add some padding of 20 pixels. So I'll add some padding of 20 pixels. So if I save this and reload here, it's actually going to add padding around this whole field. Can you see that? So now the next thing we are going to do is let's separate each form group, that is each field. As you can see, they are too close, so let's just give it a padding button so it can actually give space at the bottom. So the next thing is for us to target our form group this time around. So dot form group dot form dash group. You open your curly braces, then you say padding, say padding dash bottom should be 15 pixels. So if I save this and reload, it's actually going to add a space between the field. Now the next thing we are going to do is we want to separate this label and input. You know, label and the input are inline level elements. If you followed in my HTML crash course, you know that label and inputs are inline level elements. So I want to push this input down without adding line break from my HTML file. So now if I come here, first of all, this form group here, you need to say dot dash my form, then dot form group. So these are supposed to be. Then you start with your label and input. So now you can now say dot my form dot dash my form label. So we start with label dot dash my form label. Then you open your curly brace, you say display equals to block. So we are going to change it to block level elements using our CSS. So if I save this and reload, it's actually going to push the input down under the label. You understand? So the next thing we are going to do is to actually style this our input and give it enough size that we want. You understand? So I would like my input to have the exact size of my container. Maybe this should reach extreme here. So if I come here, I say dot my dash form, then I'll say input input, then I open my curly brace. I say padding should be 8 pixel. Now the next thing I want to put again is width. Width should be, let me say, 100% of the container. You understand? So it can take the exact percent of that container. So if I save, I reload, as you can see, something just happened here now. It's extended to the extreme, and as you can see, this submit button is an input type, but we don't really want this button to take the exact shape of this container. So what we are going to do is that we are going to target this type of input. You know, this type of input is button, and this type of input is what? Text. So now we are going to target only this type of input. So now if I come here, I will open a bracket here, input type. So if I open a bracket here, I'm going to have something like type. I'll write something like type equal to, then put this type equal to text. So if I just save this now and reload, it should ignore this particular button because the type of input we now want is only text. So if I reload, as you can see, our button has been ignored. All right, now the next thing we want to do is that we want to add this same style to this our text here. So what we are going to do is, if we come here now, we say put comma, then we say dot my dash form text area. So I'll just say dot my dash form text area. I will save, then reload. As you can see, this text area, this style has already take effect in this text area. Then the next thing, we want to style this button separately. So for us to style this button, we want to add a color to it. Then I can say dot my dash form, then input, and I open my bracket, input type should be equal to, input type should be equal to submit. You understand? So if I say, because I'm trying to target only this button, so I'll say input type should be equal to submit. Then the next thing is I'll open my curly braces. So if I open my curly braces, then I'll start by saying background dash color should be light gray, so which is hash 333. Then the next thing I'm gonna do is to add text color, which is color should be hash FFF, which is dark. Then if I come back here, the next thing I want to add is padding. So padding should be let me say 10 pixel top and bottom, then 15 pixel left and right. The next thing is border, so I'll put my borders to be none. So if I save this and reload, you can see the style we have actually added to this form. Now this is very fine, but there's something I want to do. What I want to do is, since this is a button and I would like it to be global, so that if I want to create a button in another place, I'll just have to use the button style to create the button. So what I'm going to do is I'll just come here, I'll get rid of this, then I'll say I'll give it a class of dot button. Let me just give it a class of dot button. Then if I save this now, let me just copy this first, put it under the container. Where is our container? Let me just put it under the container. So if I put it here, then I save, I'm actually going to copy this, come back to our HTML, then come to that button, give it a class of button. So if I save this and reload, it's still gonna be the same. Now imagine if I have, let me go to this so imagine if I have something like a link here under this paragraph. Imagine if I have something like a link here, maybe a button, but I want it to look like a link. Then I say a tab, then I can say something like read more. Awesome. So if I save, I reload, so if I have a link like this, and maybe let me just hash this, or let me just come here and say something like read more. Then if I save and reload, you're actually going to see that read more button here. But what if I want to make it to look like this particular button? So what am I going to do? I'll just come here and give it a class of what? Button. So if I give it a class of button and reload, it's actually going to take the shape of that button style that we have. But as you can see, it actually have a dark color here instead of having a white color here. But you can correct that from our CSS. So if you come back here, okay, the color is white, so you can see something is actually messing this up, and the stuff that's messing this up this way is this visited color that is black, because we visited the button. So now let's just get rid of this visited. So if I save and reload again, it's actually going to turn to white. Now what if you want to add a hover color to this button? So you can just come down here to this button and say, and target our button hover. I open my curly brace, I say background. Okay, let me just say background. So I'll just say background should be red. Then the next thing is text color, so color should be white. Awesome. So if I save this now and reload, if I hover on this, as you can see, it actually turns to red. So if I hover on this too, it's actually going to turn to red too. Now I just hope this is not too confusing that you're following up. So now that is that about our form. The next thing we are going to go into now is, let's talk how we can actually float an alignment. So let's talk about alignment. So maybe if I go back to my HTML file here, and I start by creating something like a div. So if I have a div here, let me just give it a class of block. So as a class should be block. Awesome. So if I have this like this, then I'll start by adding a heading of h3. If I add a heading of h3, I'll just give it a name of So I'll just give it a name of heading. So now I'll start by adding a paragraph. So I'll just say lorem. Now in HTML you can just click lorem and click your tab to be able to generate this type of dummy text. So I'll start by, I would like to reduce the size so it won't be so long. So let me just do it this way so that it's not going to be so long. Let me just do it this way so it's not going to be so long. So I delete this. Now if I save this, let me just duplicate. So let me just duplicate this, so I'll put it in 3 places. Awesome. So if I save this now, reload, I'm actually going to have something like this. Awesome. So I'm actually going to have something like this. So let's talk about how we can actually float this to align all of them. Now by default we have all these things on top of each other. So what we want to do is to float it to the right and make it to look like a box-like structure. You understand? So we want to float it to the right and make it look like a box-like structure. So now we are going to go back to our CSS, and the next thing we are going to do is we start by styling it. So just say dot, remember the class is block, so dot block. All right, we open our curly braces, then we start by saying float, let's say left. We want to float it left. You understand? So it will be able to align. So now the next thing we are going to do is we say the width should be okay. So since this thing is 3 in number, we are going to use this width 33.3% of the container. So 33.3% of the container. So if you come here now and let's save this. So if I save this, then come here now and reload this, so you're actually going to discover that the 3 of them are now aligned in one line. You understand? So what if we put something like let's start by putting border. So what if we say border 1 pixel, solid dark, so sorry, solid FFF. So if we save this now and reload, it's actually going to mess everything up. Why? Because this border now is actually taking the size of this 33.3, which is the best fit for this 3 element here. So it's actually taking it and adding another 1 pixel of border in it, which will not be suitable for this. You understand? So now for us to fix this, we are actually going to add, first of all, we add padding. We add padding of 10 pixel. Then we add a box, let's say box sizing. So box sizing is the best tool that will fix this. So if you say box sizing should be border box. So if you save this now, come back here and reload this, it's actually going to put all of them in one line, and it will actually be responsible according to the container. You understand? So if you expand, it takes the shape of the container. So one thing you should know is that Flexbox takes appropriate care of this type of element, but I told you that Flexbox is actually advanced for this video, so we're not going to be covering Flexbox in this video. Now the next thing we are going to talk about now is What if we have something like sidebar here? So remember, when you add something like sidebar, you need to clear it. If not, it will come and float or mess up the whole markup above, something like that. So now, if we come back to this our HTML form, then we come here, we start by creating, let's create a div. So if we create a div now, we add a class of let's just add a class of CLR, which is clear. So most times you see CLR or you see clear. Now let's create another div and give it an ID of main block. So let's just say ID, say main dash block. Now we create another div, then we give it an ID of sorry, we give it an ID of sidebar. Give it an ID of sidebar. Now I save this. So now you're not actually going to see what I've actually done. So the next thing you're going to do is, let's grab this heading and paragraph in this block. So we add it to our main block. Then the next thing, in this sidebar, we also add it to our sidebar. But now let's see if we can, let's just get rid of this heading here. So if I save this, come here and reload, so basically two of them are actually going to be on top of each other. So as you can see from here, two of them are by default are on top of each other, but it's supposed to be that this heading should be here and the sidebar should be somewhere around here. So for us to put it that way, for us to style it that way, we go to our CSS file. So when we go to our CSS file now when we go back to our CSS file, so you come here, remember how to grab our ID. So if you want to grab ID, you use number sign, which is your hash, say main dash block, then you open your number sign. So you open your curly braces, you say float should be left, because you want to float it to left. So now the next thing is, we say width should be something like 70%, because we want this to be responsive 70% of the container. Now let's just copy this here, come down here and put it. Then this time around, we are going to have this as our sidebar. So it says sidebar. Now this left here should be right this time around, and this 70% should be 100 minus 70 should be 30. So because we want to share the width percentage within the two, so you're going to say 30%. So if I save this now, come back here and reload, so as you can see, this has actually take the shape of, two of them has actually divided the width of this particular section. Now the next thing we are going to do now is, let's go to our sidebar and add more parameters like background color equals to, background color should be something like light gray. Then you save. The next thing is, let's add something like text color should be white. which is FFF. So if we save this now, come back here and reload, can you see that? Can you see what just happened? So it just added a background color for us. So now, but as you can see now, this write-up is not well fixed inside this black background box. So what we are going to do is we come back to our sidebar again. We say something like padding. We add padding to push the write-up inside. I say padding goes to 15 pixel. Then you come back here, you say box. Let's just add box sizing of border box. So if you add border box, we save this, and this will actually fix all these things. Awesome. So everything here has been fixed. So now guys, we are getting there. Now let's talk about positioning. So positioning in CSS, we have static, we have relative, we have absolute, we have fixed, we have initial, we have inherit. So static is just the default position of that particular element without you adding anything. It is static. Then relative is that the position is relatively to static. Maybe you added top, bottom, right, left. Then absolute means that it is absolute to the default settings. No, now I will show you how all of them works in a minute. Then fixed positioning means that it is fixed in a particular place of the web page. It means that no matter how you scroll in the web page, that particular element is fixed in that particular position. It is floating or fixed in that particular position. Then initial positioning is just like, I don't know how I'll put it for you, but initial position is just like putting in a position of the initial value. Then inherit is when the element just inherits the whole value from the default settings. Now you might get confused in this particular aspect, but once I start showing you what I mean by all these static, relative, absolute, fixed, initial, and inherit, then you will get to know what we are actually talking about. Now the next thing is, let's go back to our coding area. So now the next thing we are going to do is just, let's first of all clear what we did on the sidebar and the main block. So if I come here, I'll just say div, and I'll add a class of CLR div dash class of CLR, then class of CLR, then the next thing is you have div we add class of we have class of p dash box for positioning. So this p dash box should be for positioning. Now if I come here and open this div, I can decide to put something like h1 here and have something like hello. Now if I come back here again, I have something like h2, then I add something like goodbye. So now if I save this, come here and reload, it's actually going to give us hello and goodbye. Do you understand? So now the next thing we are going to do is, so now if you come back to this CSS, we'll start by targeting this our h1 and h2. That is this our p box, that is our positioning. So now if I come here, I say dot p box, p dash box, then I open my curly braces, p dash box, I open my curly braces, then I have width equals to 800 pixel. And I can also put something like height. Okay, I can say height should be equal to 500 pixel. Then I can also add again something like border. Border should be something like one pixel solid black. So let's just say #000. Then the next thing is margin. So this margin we should go with okay, let me just leave margin for the meantime. So if I save this, so if I save this and reload, as you can see, this thing is actually floating up, and that is because we have not actually cleared our positioning. So this CLR we have here, we're actually going to style it in our CSS. So let me just come somewhere here and do it. So I can say .clr, open my curly braces, .clr, open my curly braces. I can say clear, then I will say boot. So if I save this, come back here and reload, it's actually going to bring this man here down. So let me just expand this so you can see it clearly. You understand? So it's actually going to bring this man here. So let me just zoom back so you can see how it looks like. So as you can see, it has actually pushed it down. So now as you can see, this line over here is actually touching this our other section. So I'm actually going to push it down. So by using my margin, so this is where the work of margin actually comes in. Then I say something like let me say margin dash top, because the margin is supposed to be the top margin. So the top margin should be, let me just say 30 pixels. So if I save and reload, you're actually going to see that it has pushed this stuff down. So now the next thing we are going to do is, let's just come here and target these particular guys here and see how we can actually move it around inside this box. So this box is our P box. So, and remember, we are talking about positioning, so we can see how we can actually position it around this, inside this box. I'm just using this to demonstrate positioning for you. So if you come down here, you say .p box h1. So open your curly braces. Then so now when you say p dash box h1, then you can now say, let's say something like top. So if you say top like this, then you can just say 100 pixel. So if you reload this, let me see if I can actually reduce this so it will fit in. So if you reload this now, let's just say first, if you reload this and you discover that nothing will happen. So why something is not happening is because you have not set this to, we have not set the positioning. So let's just say position should be absolute. So you save, you reload, so it's actually going to disappear. But basically I want to tell you that it not actually disappear, it's actually here. Look at it here, you understand? It's actually here. And why this thing actually happened like this is that we told this particular CSS to move this h1 100 pixel from top, you understand? So now what you are actually going to do in order to correct this is, we have to come back here to our P box and say position should be relative. So So if you put it this way, let's come back here and reload. It's actually going to come back inside this our P box. Now the next thing we are going to do is let's just add here a left. So let's say left should be 200 pixels. So if I save this now, let's see what is going to happen. It's actually going to go towards the left hand side. Now the next thing I want to show you here is when you come down here, you say let's style our H2, our P box H2. So if I say .p box H2, then you open your curly brace, then you say position should be absolute. Then the next one you're gonna do is to say bottom. Okay, let's say bottom should be 40 pixel. Then the next one is right, should be 100 pixels. So what you are basically telling this is from the bottom should be 40 pixels and from right should be 100 pixels. So if we save this now and let me just drag it here and reload, see what's actually happened. So this our H2, it brought it, the bottom was 40 pixels and from right is 100 pixels. Do you understand? So that is just it. Now this is very much good in case if you are building a game that has to do with CSS. Maybe you want to move a check out a ball around the box, so you can actually apply this type of positioning in this. So now let's talk about fixed position real quick. So now if you come back to our HTML file, I'm going to go outside the container to create something like link. So if I say a tab, then I can put a class of, I can give it a class of something like fix me. So class should be fix dash me button. All right, so now if I come back, if I save this and reload this thing here, you're actually going to see a fixed position button. Do you understand? So what if I say something like hello? Maybe I came here and added something like hello. Okay. So if I save this and reload, you're actually going to see what we are doing from here. So as you can see, it's actually fixed this particular place. Now this type of thing, this type of positioning here, you can actually use it in all these social media link, maybe like button. But there's a way I want to, as you can see, if I scroll, it's actually scrolling with my page, but I want to fix it in a particular position. So I go back to my CSS. If I go back to my CSS, I come, I say dot fix dash me, then start my style. I say position should be fixed, position should be fixed, then top so the top should be, let me say 400 pixels. So if I save this now and reload, so this is actually going to move somewhere else and stay. So if I scroll, as you can see, this is actually fixed somewhere. So what if I say, let me say background color should be green. So if I save this and reload, it's actually going to turn to green. And what if I come back here and say something like, and put something like so if I save it like this, come here and reload, as you can see. So if somebody come here, the person is actually going to see that this is a WhatsApp link, and I can actually come here and put my WhatsApp link, something like put my WhatsApp URL. Don't have my WhatsApp URL off here, but I can say something like https / then I can say wa.me/ I've forgotten how to put WhatsApp link, but let me just save this and show you. You can put your URL here. So whenever you click on this, it's supposed to take you to this particular link. So if I even this my WhatsApp line is actually going to redirect me to this link, but that is not why we are here. So let me just go back and then let me just go back a little bit, then let's see how far we can go with our work. Now I know we have actually spent a lot of time, but I still want to show you a whole lot of things about CSS. So now if you watch to this extent, you will still watch it to the end. Now what I'm gonna do now is I want to teach you how you can actually use an image for a box background. Do you understand how you can use image for a background here? So we want to put image inside this background. So what we are going to do now is we open our browser, then we search for, let me search for something like light abstract image. So if I search, go to images, light abstract images, so I guess this should be okay for me. So I'm actually going to save this image. So I'll save it as bg image.png, so .jpg. So if I save it now, it has actually saved. So what I'm gonna do is to save this image. So if I right click on it, I click on save as. Now I'll save it as bg image. So remember, we are saving it inside our CSS Guru's image folder. So if I save it now, I say yes, so it's actually gonna download. Now the next thing is to close this. You understand? So that is what we are going to do. The next thing is to close this. Now we go back to our CSS file. Now having saved our image, the next thing we are going to do is once we come back to this our CSS file, the next thing we locate our p box. So this our p box, we'll start by adding from here. This is our p box. Then we start by adding a background image. So I say background image. I'll have something like I'll use something like URL. Okay, inside this URL, this is where we are going to actually locate the file we want to use. So from here I'll say something like dot because we are inside the CSS file folder. So we are going to come out from the CSS file and enter the image folder. Then we say / images, then / bg images bg image dot jpg. So if I save this and reload, it's actually going to add the image for us. You understand? But according to what I'm seeing here, it seems like the pixel of the image we used is very low. So now let's just go ahead, and the next thing we want to talk about is, let's talk about background position. So let me say background background position should be, let's just say 100 pixel and 200 pixels. So if I save this and reload, as you can see, it's actually breaking it more. So what we're going to do here is actually repeating the whole image. So we are going to set it not to repeat. You understand? So we are going to set it not to repeat. But first of all, I want to show you that, let me just remove this thing first. So let me save and reload. So now I want to show you that the image resolution we are using is very slow. So I'm going back to our image and take it to Photoshop. So I'll take this image to Photoshop. Then when I take it to Photoshop, I open it in Photoshop. So I'll go to images, image size, resolution is 72. So let me just raise it to something like 200 pixels. Then I save again, I save again. So I want to actually come back and reload this. Awesome. If I reload this, as you can see, is now 1, but I think this position is too big. So image size, let me just do it. First of all, let me do 100 pixels. So if I save, I reload, if I come here, I okay, 100 is bad. So I just want to get the exact position that will be convenient for me. So I say size again, let me Control or Z. So I say image size again, I'll use 170. Okay, then I'll save, come here and reload. So it's still breaking. So I think that 200 pixel is pretty much okay for me. So let me just say 200. So 200 is okay. So if I save this this way and reload, it's actually going to take full width. Now let me just come back here and put the parameter we have here before. So if I say 100 pixel and save, you will see that it's actually repeating the image, and we don't actually want it to repeat this image. So what you are going to do is you come here, we set, let me just go down a little bit. So I say background dash repeat should be no repeat. So if I save this now, it will actually push this down. Do you understand? Because what we did was 100 pixel 200 pixels. So it's actually pushing this down. So now the next thing we are going to do is we want to put this thing to have the same shape with this box. So we're supposed to set this to center. You understand? So now the next thing we are going to do is you say, come back here, you say background position, so background position should be center. So this center, if you save it and you reload, it's actually going to take the full width. But if I want it to cover this whole place, I can come back here and make this image size, let me just say 210 pixels. So if I save this now, come back here and reload, it's actually going to cover this. So as you're learning CSS, you still need to have graphics knowledge. So you still need to have graphics knowledge for you to excel in this field. You understand? So that is that on how to add background image on an object. So now another thing we are going to talk about is pseudo classes. So let's talk about pseudo classes in CSS. So now if we come back to our HTML file, then you come to this inside the container. So when you come inside the container, you can actually say, let's say our UL. So if you open a UL like this, then we add a bunch of li. So you can say li. So this li, inside the li, have something like list item. So if I save this now, copy this, I paste. So I just want to have a bunch of it. So I just want to have a bunch of it like this. Then first of all, I will come and give this UL a class. So if I give it a class, I'll say class should be my dash list. Awesome. So now I guess we should be heading back to our CSS so we can start styling it. So in targeting pseudo elements, let me just save this first and refresh this. So this is the bunch of the LIs that we have here. You understand? So in targeting our pseudo elements, I just want to zoom this so you can see what I'm doing. Awesome. So I think it should be okay now. So in targeting our pseudo elements, we need just to come here and say something like dot my dash list li. So then you put your colon, then you say first dash child, and you open your curly brace, you start styling. So you say background should be red. So now what you're actually telling this thing is that the first child in this list should be red. So let's say this is the first child. So if we reload this, the background color is actually going to turn to red. So now we can actually come here again and say last child. So you can actually come here and say last child. So if you come here now and reload, okay, let's just change this color to something like blue. So if you save this and reload, it's actually going to turn to blue. Now imagine a situation whereby you want the fifth child to be something like yellow color. So this is the fifth child here, and I want it to be yellow color. So what I'm going to do is I come here, I say dot my list, then I say my li. Now so you say dot my list. Now I say my li put colon, I say something like the nth. So we use this here, nth dash child. You understand? So this nth dash child, then I put some parentheses here. Then this parentheses, I'll say something like 5. So I come here now, I open my curly brace. This is where I'm gonna style. So I say background color, background should be yellow. So now what I'm actually doing here is to target the 5th child. So if you want to target the 5th or 3rd, just any nth child, you use nth dash child, then the parentheses should contain the number you're talking about, so the integer you're talking about. So now if you come here and you reload, as you can see, the 5th child is already yellow in color. So now the next one I want to show you is, let's say you want to target all the even numbers. So you say my dash list li nth child, then you say even numbers. That is, all the even numbers here should change to what? Should change to yellow. Sorry, maybe let's say gray. So gray color. So if you save this and come here and reload this, so all the even numbers, remember even numbers are numbers that can be divided by 2, so all the even numbers will be in gray color. So guys, I think we have tried a lot in this tutorial by creating all these stuffs in CSS. So now I promise you guys that we are going to work on 2 projects. One is for the tutorial and 2 is to build a website project in this particular tutorial. So this one is not going to take much of our time because you already know what you are doing, so we are going to go straight to the point. So, and the project should be inside this my website. Do you understand? So if you are, I know this have take a lot of time, you were able to watch to this extent, I think you still want to watch to the end. So now let's start by, let me just close this, then come to my website. So this is my website. Remember, these are our CSS gurus and this is my website. So we are actually done with CSS gurus. So if I come to my website, I go to new file. So from here I click on save as. So I have something like index.html. So I have something like index.html. So now if I go back to my CSS crash course, I open my website. This is where I want to save it. So I save my index.html. So I save it. So this is actually where I'll be working from. So from here I can come and say HTML tab. So it's actually going to create a new layout for me. So now let's just get rid of. So now let's start by, let's save this one and start by opening this one in a browser. So let's just close this one. So this is where we'll be working on our new project. Now the next thing we are going to do is, let's go ahead and create our CSS folder. So we can actually come here, then we have worked on CSS gurus already, so we are now working on my website, which is to create a new website template or a new website page. Do you understand? So we are working inside this my website. So if I open here, I already created my index.html from my Sublime text. So this time around I'll just create a folder which is called CSS. So the folder should be CSS. So inside this CSS is where I'm going to be creating my style.css. So now coming back to my Sublime text, I've already created the CSS folder. So I go to file, I go to new file, then I go to file again, I go to save as, then from here I'll save it inside my CSS folder. So I'll say style, so I'll call it style.css. So you can actually use any name of your choice, but I choose to use style.css. But any name you use, just make sure it has .css extension. So now the next thing we're going to do is to actually save this. So once we save this, if we open here, we can actually see that from our style.css. Now going back to our HTML, going back to our HTML file, the next thing we are going to do is to link this file and this file together. So if you want to link this file and this file together, what we are going to do is you come here, come under this title, you say link. So we are going to use link tag. You understand? So you say link, you hit your tab key. So as you can see, this link, as we did in our HTML groups, this link is actually telling us that this is a style sheet and this is a text/CSS. So from here, this is where we are going to be putting our URL, and our URL says CSS/style.css. So CSS/style.css. So we save this. So once you save this, we now link, we have already linked these two files together. Now let's start with our markup. For me, I prefer doing my markup first, then after my markup, then I can now go to my CSS and start styling. So for us to do our markup, we are going to go into the body. So when we go into the body, we start with something like header. So say header. So when you say header, you hit your tab, you open it. Now this header should have something like heading. So I say H1. So this heading should be like my website title, or should act like my website logo. So I will just say my web site. You understand? So I'll just say my website, and again we're supposed to add our title here, so it will not be empty. So the title again should be, because as you can see, if I hover here, I'm not actually getting the website meta keyword. So I'll just say something like my web site. So once I save this, come here and reload. If I hover on this, it's actually going to show me my website meta title, which is my website, and also my website, the one we have put here. Now the next thing we are going to do is let's add an ID to this header. So I'll say ID. So I'll say ID, then give it an ID. So give it an ID of main. I'll just say main dash header. Awesome. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to wrap this site in a container, but I wouldn't want the container to wrap the whole website. You understand? So I want it in a way whereby my header will take the full width of the website. You understand? So now, and what the next thing I will do is to start putting a container. So if I want to put a container, I can come here and say my div. So if I put my div, I can actually come here and add a class of container, Awesome. So now I'm actually going to wrap this under the container, inside the container. So if I come here, I'll come and put it here. So if I come here, I'll come and put it here. Now the next thing we are going to do is to add our nav bar. So adding our nav bar, let's just duplicate this. So if I duplicate and paste it here, and I'll change this to nav, then I'll also change this to nav bar, then come here and change this to nav. Alright, so now the nav bar should have a class of container too. Then let's start by, I'll change this. I'm going to remove this actually. So let's start adding our UL. So UL for our nav bar. Then the next thing is, let's do our li, which is our list. Then inside this list we have something like a link. Awesome. So we have anchor tag here, which is actually going to go to nowhere, so we are going to hash it by adding hash. So from here now, we are actually going to, the next thing we are going to do is to add something like home. Awesome. So now we are going to actually duplicate this. So by duplicating this stuff, we come here, we'll paste. Let me zoom so you can see what I'm doing. We'll paste. So now we turn this to home, then we turn this one to about. Turn this one to about, then this one should be something like services page. So this one should be services page. Then the next thing is contact us. Do you understand? So now let me just see if I can actually arrange this. Awesome. So let me see if I can actually push this. Awesome. So it's okay like this. Now the next thing we're going to have in our markup is something like showcase area. So from here, I'm going to start with something like section. So if I open my section tag here, I'm actually going to give this section an ID of let me say ID of something like showcase. So something like showcase is okay. Then from here, I'll start by creating my div. So I say div. Then this my div, I'm gonna open this div and give it a class. So remember, these are the things that you can use ID for, because it's very, very unique. So like I'm not going to have another main header or another nav bar, and I'm not going to have another showcase. So this is showcase, sorry. I'm not going to have another showcase. So this is just the only place that they are going to appear, and they are unique. So you use classes where you have to make use of such class repeatedly, but ID is where you have to make use of that same class. When that class is unique, you use something like ID. Now the next thing we are going to talk about now is giving our div a class. So I'll give my div a class of something like container. So div, all of them should have their own container. So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'll start by putting my h1. So this is my h1, which is header. Then I'll start by putting something like lorem. So when I say lorem, I hit my tab, it's actually going to generate this for me. But let me just shorten this. I'm actually going to shorten it because I don't need all these things. Now the next thing we should be doing now is next thing we should be doing now is awesome. So now the next thing we are going to be creating is something like a main area, which is also going to have a section. Then this section should also have an ID. So I'll say ID name should be main. ID name should be main. So we have something like H1 tab. Then from here you can put something like welcome. So we have something like welcome. So now the next thing we are going to have here is let's put something like paragraph. So I say my p tag. If I open it, okay, let me just do it this way. Have something like lorem again, which is definitely going to bring a dummy text for me. So now the next thing we are going to do is, let me just shift this so that it's actually going to look more okay. It's actually going to look more okay. So now this main area is going to be at the left. Then let's have something like sidebar, so which is going to go with a side tag. Now I taught all these things in HTML crash course. So this aside is going to have an ID again, ID of something like let's say sidebar. That should be the ID. Then if you come down here now, let's add some text. Okay, let's just copy this. Let's just copy this and put it inside this outside. So but this time around, let's just make it a little bit shorter than it is. Then awesome. So this is good. Now the next thing is so now let me just zoom back a little bit. So now the main and the sidebar is, I don't want to see it in the middle, so I'm actually going to give it a container. So I'll come here and say div. I'm going to wrap two of them in a container. So I say class should be container. So now let me just copy this and wrap it here. So where is my container? My container div is here. I'm just going to put it here. Now the next thing is, let me see if I can actually shift this to awesome. Now and then finally in our markup, we should have something like footer. So I say footer open. Then I'm going to give this footer an ID. Sorry, and so I'm going to give this footer an ID. So I say ID should be main footer, main dash footer. Now inside this main dash footer, we are going to have a text. So let me just start by paragraph. Then I'll have something like copyright. Then I'll use this my copyright symbol. I taught this in my HTML crash course. Let me zoom this so you'll be able to see what I'm going to put. So I say unsigned 2024, then put my colon. Now this is how to write copyright. This is how to put copyright symbol. Then if I save this, now let's come back here and reload and see what we have actually done so far in our HTML markup and how beautiful it is. So now, as you can see, this whole thing here is just like is very ugly. So without CSS, HTML is very ugly. But when we start adding CSS, then you will see how we can actually style all this stuff. You understand? Now, but before we begin, let me just go back here. I quickly want to create a folder here. So the folder should be named something like images. Something like this is okay. Let me just go back here. So as you can see, we now have our folder images, which is still empty for now. Now, as you can see, what you have here is and 2024, and this is not how it's supposed to be. So let me just go back. This is supposed to be and copy. Then I shift here. I say 2024. So if I save this and reload, can you see that it is now giving us the copyright symbol? You understand? Now the next thing is, since we have arrived here, let's go back to our CSS style and let's go back to our CSS style sheet and start styling our website. So first of all, we are going to start with body. So I say body, open my curly brace, then I'll start with something like background color. So I'll start with something like background color. I'll give it a color of number sign light gray, which is F4, F4, F4. Alright, so now the next thing I want to add is a text color. So my color should be something like let me say something like dark, and I say 555. So this is the color code I want to use. Now the next thing is font family. So I say font dash family should be something like Arial, comma, I'll add again Helvetica. This is vertical. I'll add something like Helvetica, and I say comma. Then the last one should be sans serif. Now another thing I would like to add here is, let me go by adding my font size, which is 16 pixels by default. So font dash size should be 16 pixels. Now the next thing I would like us to add is line height. So I'll say line height of 1.6 em, 1.6. So this is almost the same thing with what we have done before, 1.6 em. Then the next one is, let's add a margin of 0 pixel. So now we save this. Then another thing I would like us to set again is our container. So I'll say dot container, open my curly brace, then I'll say something like width should be 80%. Let's say 80% width of container. Then margin should be something like auto. Then remember we did this in our last class. Then I'm going to add what we call overflow. You understand? So that it is not going to, like, no, I'll show you the work of overflow. Then you say overflow should be something like hidden. Overflow should be something like hidden. So this is to like correct the whole element from flowing against each other or against the header. You understand? Now the next thing we are going to do is to style our header, our main header. So say dot. Remember we gave it ID, so ID you don't use dot, you use number sign, which is your hash. Then I say main dash header. I say main dash header, and I'll give it something like a background color of, let me just say coral. So my background color should be something like coral. Now, which is just like this coral is just like a light orange. Then the next thing is, let me say text color should be white. So color should be number sign FFF, which is white. So now the next thing we are going to style again is, let's style our navbar. So my number sign, grab my navbar. Now open my curly brace, and by styling I'll add a background color of okay, first of all let's look at this. Let me just save this first, Control S. So let me just save this first. Yes, so let me just save this first and reload. So if I reload, this is actually how it's going to look like. So now the next thing you want to do is so this is our head, you understand? So the next thing is, let's style our navbar. So by styling our navbar, we just need to get rid of this boil point and float this whole thing in inline, display it inline. So it's actually going to look like our header, you understand? Then add a background color and do some styling, and it's going to look okay. So now let's start by styling this our navbar. So now I'll come back to my navbar and I'll say background color should be number sign light dark gray, so which is 333. And if I come back here, I say color, my color should be something like a light gray. So put my number sign, or it should be something like white. So if I just put this, I come back here. Then the next thing I will want to style is my navbar UL. You understand? So we can actually get rid of this, but let's just come back here. Let's save this first, come back here and reload. So you're actually going to see that we now have a background color and a text color. So now we need to work on this all these lists. So we need to work on each of them. You understand? So now guys, the next thing we want to talk about now is this. So for us to style our navbar, our navbar here. So if I'm going to come back here and say and grab my navbar ID, which is, I'll say navbar UL. So I open my curly brace, then my navbar UL should go with something like padding should be 0. Now let me say list style should be none. So because I want to get rid of the bullet points and the link, so it should be none. Now the next thing we will want to look at is our navbar list. So that is our navbar li. So say navbar li. Awesome. So if I open this, I'll say something like because I want to really display this inline instead of block. As you can see, it's in a block level, but we want to make it inline. So I'll come here and say display should be inline. So display should be inline. Now if I actually come here and reload this, you're actually going to see what we have. You understand? So we now display this in one line. You understand? And we have got rid of the boiling point by making this list size 0. None. Sorry, this list size none. So the next thing is, let's see how we can actually add color and get rid of this link color and underline. So now by doing that, we come back to our CSS. We say our navbar link, number sign, navbar a, put my curly brace. I'll say color should be white, so FFF. Now if I come here, I'll say something like text dash decoration should be none, which is the underline should be none. Then the next one I'm going to talk about here is font size. Font size should be something like 18 pixel. Now the next thing I'm going to talk about is padding. So padding right, let's just say something like padding right should be 15. Yes, 15 pixel is okay. So now if I save this now, come back here and reload, you're actually going to see that we are now getting our nav bar. Now guys, the next thing we are going to do is our showcase. So in this showcase section now, I'm going to teach you how you can actually use a background for image. So I think we have done this before, but let's just repeat itself in this showcase. So if you come here now, you grab onto your showcase. So if I grab onto my showcase now, then I come here, the next thing I'm going to do is to say background image. Background image. Then this time around I'm going to use something like URL. Then inside this URL I'm going to put this. I'm going to put this now, and then I say something like let me just zoom this so you see what I'm doing clearly. So remember, the image should be inside this okay, first of all, let's go and grab image from our browser. Let's go and download the image. So from here I can say light abstract. Okay, let's say light abstract Cora. Then if you do it this way, let's go to images. So this images, let's just scroll down and see if we can actually see something better. Okay, let's say for example that we want to go, okay, this is a video, this is not an image. Let's say for example that we want to go with this. So let me just open this in a new tab. So let me just download this, save as. So this time around, you are saving it not inside CSS groups. You should save it inside my website and inside images. Then from here, I can just call it something like showcase. Then I save. Right now, let me just get rid of this. So coming back to this my URL, I'm actually going to say dot because it's inside the image. So I have to come out to meet it. I have to come out from CSS to meet it inside the image. So I say slash images, which is our folder, then slash showcase.jpg, showcase.jpg. So now if I save this and come back here and reload this, as you can see it just showed up now. But what I want to do here is, let me zoom back so you can see I want to add some other thing like background should be center, that is background position. Background position should be something like center and right. Awesome. So now another thing I want to add is, let me say something like height. So height should be something like 300 pixels. So if I save this and reload, you're actually going to see my background here, but I think the size, the resolution of this image is too small. So the background of this image, the resolution of this image is small. So I'm actually going to add something like let's do it this way. Let me just increase the resolution from Photoshop. So if I come back here, these images, so I drag this image to Photoshop and open it in Photoshop. So this time around, let me just increase the resolution. I go to image size, I set it to something like 200, then I save. So once I save this, then go back and let's just go back and reload this. Awesome. So as you can see, it's actually going to take the full width. Now the next thing we are going to be working on here is, as you can see, this is responsive. Now the next thing I want to do now is let's style the things that are inside the showcase. But first of all, if you come here, we need to add something like margin. Let's say margin bottom. Margin bottom should be something like 30 pixel. Then text align should be something like center. Text align should be center. Then the next thing is, let's grab onto our showcase H1. So this is the right up inside here. So you say put your number sign, showcase H1. Then we start by styling it, which is adding our color should be something like white. Color should be number sign FFF, which is white. Then come here, say font dash size should be 50 pixel. Then the next one is, let's say line height should be 1.6 em. Then let's add some padding. Okay, let's make it padding top, so it can actually push everything down. Padding top should be something like 30 pixels. So now if I save this, come back here and reload, you're actually going to see the style that we just added. Now if I expand this, you discover that if I scroll down, this right up is actually entering this same line, and that is because of we need to, this showcase section now, we need to change this height to something like mean height. You understand? So let's just say mean dash height should be 300 pixels. So what you're actually doing is, as we grow this, as this text grow, this background should also grow with it. So now if I come here now, let's just first of all save this. Then if I come here and reload, so what I'm actually doing is, as this text is increasing, the hero section should also increase. But I think the font size here, 50 pixel, is very big for me. So let me just see if I can change it to 20 pixel. So if I save and reload, can you see that it just reduced? So I think let me just increase it to something like 30 pixel is okay. Awesome. So now what you're actually doing is as you are growing, this website is going to be responsive. Look at everything is responding. Now the next thing we want to work on is let me just zoom this back. We want to work on the main and the sidebar. So now for us to grab our main, we can just come here and say our main. Okay, we do it this way. Hash main should be our curly brace, then we say float should be right. Awesome. Then we say something like width, we add width should be 70% because we want to divide the 100% for the main and the sidebar, so width should be 70%. Then padding should be something like 0. Let's add 0, then 30 pixel. Then if you come down here again, you have box dash sizing should be something like border box. So let's just say border box. Understand? Then let's start by styling our sidebar. So hash sidebar, our sidebar. So from here now I can say float, repeat the same thing. Float should be right. Okay, this float supposed to be left. Sorry, this float supposed to be red. Then this one should be right. Then the next thing is width. Width should be 30% this time around because we have already given this one 70%. Now the next thing we should be talking about here is something like the background color. So background should be $333, that is dark. Then the next one should be, let's say, text color should be something like white. That is color should be $FFF white. Now the next thing we should put is let's add some padding. Padding should be also 0.30 pixel. Now another thing we should be talking about is box dash sizing should be, let's say, border box 2. Border box. So if you save this now, let me expand this. So if you save this now and reload, you're actually going to see what we have in our showcase section. Now the next thing we should be talking about is the footer. Now, but before we go into the footer, I actually want to add a padding around this so that there will be a space between this. So now if I come back here, this padding here, instead of putting 30 pixel, let me just say something like 10 pixel around it. So if I save now, come back here and reload, you're actually going to see that. Okay, now let's start talking about our footer. This should be 0. So if I save this and reload, you're actually going to see the space I'm talking about. Now the next thing I'm going to talk about now is let's talk about the footer. So remember, our ID for the footer should be main dash footer. Awesome. Main dash footer. Open your curly brace, then you say background. Our background should be something like dark, so $333. Then if you come here, you say color should be something like white, so background $FFF. Now if you come here again, let's add something like text align should be center, text align should be center, and the next thing is padding. So padding should be something like 20 pixel. Padding should be something like 20 pixel, then 20 pixel around it. Then another one is margin. So let's add the margin top to give it a space at the top. So margin top should be something like 40 pixel per inch. Now if we save this, come here and reload, you're actually going to see our footer here. So see our footer, and as you can see, we just created a beautiful web page now. So the next thing we should talk about before we close is how to make the whole thing responsive. Because if you check now, if we reduce this, as you can see, this thing just, this should be a mobile version, and this thing just divided this way. But we want to make it in a way that when it comes to mobile version, it can, maybe this one should go on top of this one. So we can actually achieve that by maybe come here, add some media query. So I can say add media, awesome. Then I open my bracket. Then this bracket is where I'm going to add, what I'm actually trying to do is, okay, let me just say max width, max dash width, awesome, should be, let me say 600 pixels, 600 pixels. So what I'm actually trying to do is, I'm trying to say that everything here should be under 600 pixels. You understand? So now if I come back here and say, maybe open my curly brace, then I can come and style my main here. So I'll say main, open my curly brace, then I'll say width should be 100%. Then another one is floats should be none. Now let's just duplicate this. Okay, let's just duplicate this and say, and change this one to for sidebar. So I'll say side. Okay, so say sidebar. Now there is something I want to point out here. The two settings should be the same. So now if I come back here now, if I save this, come back and reload, you're just going to see everything will be responsive. Now thank you guys for participating in this tutorial. I know it's a long tutorial and is to equip you in everything that you need to know about CSS. So thank you guys for participating in this tutorial. I remain my humble self, UGWU KELVIN CHIMUANYA, the CEO of BSTER-TECHNOLOGY. So I advise you can go and make more research on CSS and make more research on Flexbox, so you can learn more about CSS. But I think this course has given you every clue you need to know on how CSS really works. So thank you guys. See you in my next tutorial.